But this is the Pixel 5a, and this is the Pixel 4a 5G, announced in September 2020, nearly a year ago. And like I said, it's like that game. There are so many unchanged things. This has got to be the smallest year-over-year refresh I've ever seen between phones in my life. So here, let's just go over all the things that are exactly the same, okay? So it's the same exact specs as last year, Snapdragon 765G chip, same 6 gigs of RAM, same 128 gigs of storage, same 12 megapixel camera on the back alongside the same 16 megapixel ultra wide, same back mounted fingerprint sensor, same speakers, and same headphone jack. And it's got the same perfectly fine 18-watt charging and the same lack of wireless charging. So the natural question is, okay, it's a new phone. What is actually different? What do they change? So this is where the spotting the differences game comes in. You might have seen the color. Side by side, this is the easiest thing to spot. It is a slightly new color. Last year, the 4A 5G was just called just black. The new 5A is literally called mostly black. It's actually a slightly green cast to it, so kind of catches the light nice sometimes. But yeah, then it looks like a green phone, but it's mostly black. Then the 5A is actually slightly, very slightly larger. It's rocking a 6.3-inch 1080p 60Hz OLED display instead of the 6.2-inch 1080p 60Hz OLED display from last year. Same pixel density, same hole punch cutout, just a little bit bigger. And then from there, there's a bunch of nice little quality of life improvements. You might not ever know just from picking up the phone, but the longer you use it, the more obvious they would be. So the 5A has a metal unibody construction now instead of the straight polycarbonate from last year. And you can hardly tell holding it because they coat it in this soft touch finish anyway, so it feels kind of like a rubberized type of plastic. But no doubt that's going to wear better over time. And it also lets them get to IP67 water and dust resistance, which the 4A 5G did not have. And I do like this new textured power button on the 5A. It's got a nice little accent color, and I still love when phone makers do this. Honestly, they all should. And it's got a raised pattern to ID it in your pocket, so that's cool. And then on the inside, the Pixel 5A has a substantially larger battery, so up to nearly 4,700 milliamp hours, and that is sweet. So the last A-series Pixels were already quite good with the battery life because they're not drawing a whole ton of power. Again, they still all have 60 Hz displays, but the 5A's literal biggest improvement is on something it already did well, so that's totally welcome. Long-lasting battery is always good to see. But then the only other things you'd be able to identify, you'd have to check the spec list for, Gorilla Glass 6 on the new one versus Gorilla Glass 3 on the 4A 5G. And they actually removed the laser autofocus on the new 5A. So, I don't know, maybe a bit of a cost-saving move. Kind of a bummer to see that now gone.
Let's start with what hasn't changed. The Pixel 5a uses the same capable Snapdragon 765G processor as the 4A 5G, with 6 GB of RAM and 128 gigs of storage. It also offers the same cameras, including 12 megapixel main and 16 megapixel ultra-wide rear-facing units. There's still no wireless charging, and the screen still uses a standard 60 Hz refresh rate. And there's one thing we're glad to see sticking around. The headphone jack is still here. So what's new on the 5A? There's a slightly bigger 6.34-inch display, and the battery gets a big boost, up to 4,680 milliamp hours, 20% bigger than the 4A 5Gs. The 5A is built with a metal unibody and includes an IP67 waterproof rating. Another important number that's different this time around is the price. The 5A will cost $449, which is $50 less than the 4A 5G's introductory price. Oh, and a few words about 5G. The 5A supports sub-6 GHz 5G, which its predecessor did too. But this time, there won't be a version that supports millimeter wave 5G. That's the super fast, hard-to-find version of 5G that Verizon in particular has been pushing hard, and it's no great loss here. What's more worrisome is the lack of C-band support. C-band is the good mid-band stuff that Verizon and AT&T will be adding over the next few years to make their 5G networks better. The Pixel 5a has the hardware and FCC approval to use C-band, but it doesn't support it at a software level. Google says it could add support later, but is being very non-committal about it right now.
Buttons on the side, the fingerprint sensor, a lot of things like that are going to be saving them money because they're using some, familiar parts from a previous model. Now, with that being said, let's take a look at this phone physically to see what the differences actually are between this and last year's 4A 5G. Now, looking at the back, the first thing you'll notice, and I tried to catch some different lights here, it's actually a slightly different color. This is actually called mostly black, although when you look at it, it definitely is a very, very dark forest green kind of. So in some lighting, you can definitely see it looks very green. In other lighting, it definitely looks really black. Now, you'll see that the back is also slightly different, although you can't tell on the video right here. It's actually a metal unibody rather than the polycarbonate one we saw last year, which should give you, overall more durable phone, but also a better water resistance rating. IP67 means that you don't have to worry about this phone if you're getting it wet. That's a huge positive that we normally don't see in a lot of mid-range phones. So the metal unibody is actually coated, so it's really hard to tell that it's not plastic. It feels a lot like plastic, although it doesn't really have a lot of flex, and it does feel very sturdy. So overall physical build, good job. That's definitely a major improvement, although it's subtle and you don't notice it at first glance. We still have that fingerprint sensor on the back, which I think is great. It's a very fast way to sign in. We also have the camera bump. You'll notice that they did remove the laser autofocus on the bottom. Maybe that's to save cost, maybe it's because they didn't actually need it, software was improved. Whatever the reason might be, we still do have two cameras back here and a flash, and the two cameras are going to be identical. Here's the big positive. They're identical to what we saw on the Pixel 5 last year. So we're looking at a 12.2 megapixel wide angle and a 16 megapixel ultra wide. I'll test out the cameras in a second, but we already know they're gonna do a fantastic job. Looking at the front, we have a slightly larger display right here. And instead of last year's 6.2-inch display, this is now 6.3 inches. It is a 1080p OLED display with 60 hertz. A small disappointment. I know a lot of people wanted to see at least 90 hertz on here, but all things considered, 60 is still going to do a reasonable job, and you are saving money on this device.